And our first guest has a very interesting um, story that she's telling about her family tree. And her name is Mary Romney-Schaab, and she's going to be joining us shortly. But her father was, hello,
Hi,
how are you? Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here.
I was just telling the audience that your father was one of the few Black civilians that was captured during the Holocaust by the Nazis. And we really don't hear very much about Black people being involved in that. In fact, we never hear about it.
That's
So your story is a very interesting one. And just give us some background first, and then tell us what made you write the book on this topic. It's actually book worthy. I mean, it's definitely a worthy subject, but sounds like it required a lot of research too, even though it was your father. So tell us about that. What was his name?
My father's name was Lionel Romney. He
Okay.
was born in 1912 and he passed away in 2004. He was from the Dutch side of the island of Saint Martin in the
Wow.
Caribbean. And that's why the name of the book is An Afro-Caribbean in the Nazi Era, because he was
Oh,
Afro-Caribbean. And from about the mid 1930s until 1940, he was a merchant sailor. He was a sailor on cargo ships sailing between the Caribbean, North America, and Europe. And in June 1940, he was aboard a Greek merchant ship. It was sailing from Cardiff in Wales through the Mediterranean on its way to Greece. And when that ship reached the area between Tunisia and Sicily, it struck a floating mine, which, as you know, is an explosive device.
yeah.
And when it struck the mine, it sank. But the crew of my father's ship was rescued by a ship from the Italian Navy. And that was how my father became a captive. That was how he became a political prisoner in the Italian camp system. So he remained a prisoner in that system. He was transferred through a series of internment camps in Italy from 1940 to 1944. And in June 1944, the Germans came through Italy and they took the prisoners, all the prisoners in the Italian camp system, and they put them in concentration camps, in Nazi concentration camps. So that's how my father ended up in a Nazi concentration camp. And the name of the concentration camp where my father was sent was Mauthausen, and it is in Austria. And that was where my father spent the last year of the war as a prisoner in the Mauthausen concentration camp from 1944 to 1945. And he was liberated from that camp in May 1945 when the US Army liberated that camp.
Now, was his experience different from the other people there? Because obviously, his nationality was different. And I lived in Belgium for 5 years, and we had the honor of actually visiting a couple of the concentration camps because many of them actually, believe it or not, still stand to this day. And you can actually visit them, and some of them still look the way that they did back then. They're very very nerve wracking,
Yeah.
and there many of them. When some people think that only Jewish people were there, and some of them wound up being prisons for people of other nationalities from other countries,
That's
and
right.
then some were like your father's experience, where they were there and they were kind of mixed in with the other people, and I think that they were treated differently, not better, but differently. And I was just wondering how your father's experience was.
Yeah, what you say about the diversity of prisoners is very important. At Mauthausen, there were prisoners from every country in Europe and actually every continent as well. Um, there were very, very few Black prisoners in the entire system, but there were a few other Black prisoners there at the camp. Now, my father was brutalized just like all the other prisoners, but and I'll say that that camp was one of the most dreaded concentration camps. It was the only one in the entire system that was specifically designated to work its prisoners to death. It was the only death through work camp. And the work was done in a quarry, but my father was not assigned to work in the quarry. Working in the quarry was almost always lethal, but my father was not assigned to work in the quarry. So that's one thing that saved him. And another thing that saved him was his command of languages. He spoke English, German, Dutch, Italian, and Spanish, and let me see, Papiamento. Let me see, English, Dutch, German, Italian, Spanish. Right, those were the European languages that he spoke. So prisoners with language skills were often allowed to live longer than others because they could be used as interpreters. And that was the case with my father. I believe that that's the main reason why he was allowed to live as long as he was. So that's kind of the answer to your question about whether or not he was treated differently. But what you say about the concentration camps that you can still go and visit, I think is very important. I've been to Mauthausen myself 5 times. The first time I went there was 2 years after my father passed away in 2006, and that was extremely impactful. But I just came back from there actually last month. I was there, you can visit a lot of those camps as museums. They are still standing, and that is, I think, very, very important. But I didn't answer the first question about why I wrote the book. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
But I wrote the book for a few reasons. One of them was that I felt, as you said in the beginning, you know, a lot of people don't know about the role of Black people in the Nazi era. A lot of people think that they don't, well, most people really are not exposed to the kind of history that would teach them about the diversity of prisoners in the Nazi concentration camp system. And certainly the Black population in that system has been overlooked. The history of Black people in the Nazi concentration camp system has certainly been overlooked by most historians. And that's one reason why I wanted to write the book. I wanted to shed some light on that area of history. But mostly I wanted to weave another thread into the tapestry of African diaspora history, because I wanted to help complete the picture, because so much of it is missing. Because our history has been excluded, largely excluded from mainstream history books and other forms of mainstream history as it's told and as it's taught. So I wanted to add something to African diaspora history. I wanted to add a chapter that's generally missing. And I think it's important to say that, you know, we as African diaspora people really have not been in control of our own narrative. That's why so much of our history is missing from the mainstream. And that is not our fault. We have not been in control of it because other people have appropriated our history. And I think that oral history helps us take back a lot of that history that has been taken away from us by other people. And another reason why I wanted to write the book was because I wanted it to be an example of how everyone has participated in and been a witness to historical events, not only famous people, right? And I think that oral history has a democratizing effect in that way, because it elevates the experience of everyday people and it shows how they have witnessed history. And also, I wanted my book to be an example of how of oral history, and I wanted it to be at least to encourage, if not inspire, other people to record oral histories with their elders and members of their communities. So those are some of the reasons why I wrote the book. I mean, my father's story only came to light because of oral history. It would have remained untold had it not been for oral history. And I feel that it was through that oral history that I was able to gain a deeper, a wider and deeper understanding of the Nazi era, a more diverse and inclusive understanding of that period in history, only because of my father's, of listening to my father talk about it. And what I say about oral history all the time is that it brings history to life and it brings life to history. I think that oral history is significant for many reasons, including that. So I wanted my book to be an example of why other people should consider recording oral histories with their elders.
Well, it definitely solidifies the reason why we should take the time and sit at our elders' feet and listen. And because so much of that history could have been lost if one, he refused to talk about it, or two, you refused to listen. So the fact that you sat and you listened and you took in those stories, because I think about part of my grandmother's history that would have been lost had I not listened to her stories of when she was in school. There's a whole school that she went to that no longer exists in New Orleans, but I carry the history of that story of that school because I listened to her stories. And I share that history as much as I can. So I think about the history that you're sharing in this book because you listen to your father's stories. So I thank you for carrying that history and writing this book because I never knew prior to this conversation, I never knew that there were Black people in concentration camps. I never would have known that. I
You
never
know,
even
I
thought about it.
heard about it, but in passing. You know, I've heard people say there were multiple nationalities or ethnicities that were involved,
But you
but
never would have thought
never
about Black people
specific.
being some of
Right,
those ethnicities.
Exactly.
right. Never this specific. And one thing, we're everywhere
Yes, this is true.
because the origins of man are, in the seat of Africa. So we're we're in every story, but we don't get credit. Everything
Right.
that's happened around the world, practically, we're somewhere involved. And I'm glad that because in the last, let's say, 100 years, we've been really writing books. Before that, we couldn't we couldn't write books. So, and of late, there's been much more history being written. A lot of it is historical fiction just because people don't have, they have to fictionalize it, but it's based on real people and real situations. Now, are you a historian by training
I am
or?
not. I'm not. I'm an English teacher. I mean,
Oh,
I'm a
okay. Then you
retired
sound
English
like a
teacher.
historian.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. But my profession is the teaching of English to speakers of other languages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Isn't
that
that
kind of English.
uh,
Yeah,
ESL? Is
that's
that
right.
okay?
That's right.
Okay. I was trying to
Yes.
remember the acronym.
Yeah.
Mm. So, did your dad have journals or letters or anything like that? Or was your writing, your preparation of the manuscript purely based on oral?
He did not write anything about his experience. I was very fortunate to be able to get him to talk about it because he was silent about it for, let me see, about 44 years. He refused to talk about it. Um,
Oh,
I tried for over 20 years, probably around 22, 23 years to get him to talk about it. And he never would. I could never get him to talk about it. And people say, yeah, but so why did he start talking about it at that particular point? Why did he start talking about it then and there? And I have no idea. I have no idea why he started talking when he did. Um, but maybe he was just ready. But I think that the fact that it was an oral history situation where there was a camera and there was a stranger, I mean, not a stranger to me, but a kind of almost like a stranger to him there in the room, I think that that might have had some influence on his willingness to talk. I never thought that he would talk about it. I started doing the oral history with my parents because I wanted to get as much family history as I could because they were in their late 70s and early 80s when I started the oral history. And while they still had their memories intact, I wanted them I wanted to record as much as I could about the family history. So that's why I started the oral history with both of them. But I never thought that I would get them to talk about the war.
When did you know that? When did you know this history about him? I mean, did you know this prior to when he started talking about it, or when did you find out about it?
I knew almost nothing. I knew about 1/10 of 1% of the tip of the iceberg. That's about all I knew. So because what happened was when I was a child, or I'll say throughout my childhood, I would ask my parents about their life before I was born. Every child does that. You always ask your parents. You get curious about their early life, so you ask. And my mother was always very forthcoming, but my father would talk about his early life in St. Martin. And then when he came to New York in the late 40s and after that, and I began to notice that there was a gap in what he was saying. After a few years, I noticed that there was a gap. And then I realized that the gap was World War II. So I asked him and he wouldn't talk about it. And after many years of asking him, I finally asked my mother when I was 15. I remember very clearly, I said, to my mother, I said, well, Dad won't talk about World War II. I wonder how he experienced it. I'm curious. I know that he was in Europe, but I would like to know how he experienced it. And she said he was in a German concentration camp. That was what she said. And it shocked me so badly that I can still remember the impact, the emotional impact of her saying that. Because nothing could have prepared me for that, nothing at all. So she said, but you must never let him know you know. You must never ask him about it, and you must never tell him that I told you. So but that, of course, just intensified my curiosity. But I couldn't let him know that I knew, and I couldn't ask him directly. So, but I kept asking, I kept trying to paint him into a corner, trying to, indirectly and very obliquely ask him about his experience. And so the day that it finally came out of him, I said my last question before he started talking about it was, so where were you when the war ended? Because I knew that he had to be in a concentration camp when the war ended, but that was all I knew. And she said a German concentration camp, and it was a concentration camp in Austria. I mean, it was German to the extent that the Germans were running them, but it was not in Germany. I thought that all the concentration camps were in Germany. I didn't know. I knew nothing about the Nazi era before I started talking to my father. I mean, before my father started talking to me about it. So I
In
painted.
Austria were pretty bad.
Sorry?
The ones in Austria were pretty bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes. Like I say, the most lethal of all the quarry camps was the one where my father was imprisoned. The Austrian camps were no different than the camps in the other countries where thousands upon thousands of people died. Absolutely. But I said to my father, I said, so where were you when the war ended? And that was when it came out. That was when he started talking about it. But I really don't know exactly why he started talking about it at that moment. But what I do know is that he must have needed to talk about it because for the rest of his life, he never stopped talking about it. And I
Wow.
recorded everything he said. I recorded all the oral history that I did with him. I recorded everything, and that is the basis of my book.
Oh, okay.
And I
One
also,
thing,
I'm sorry, I also talk about, and in the book, I also describe my visits, my first 2 visits to the concentration camp.
oh, okay. Yeah, I
I'm
was
sorry.
gonna say, no, no problem. Um, because he was older when he started talking about it, what happens as people age, and I have experiences with family members who aging, and their short-term memory becomes very, very limited. But the long-term memory, they start to talk about details from 40, 50 years ago or longer.
Longer.
And the details are vivid.
Yes,
It's
they are.
names and places and
Yes,
situations. So
yes.
that may have been part of it, just in the aging process. People start talking about the past. They
Well,
sort of
that's
live in the past,
well,
not the
that's what they
future.
have. They don't
Yeah,
have much future.
right. They don't really live in the future anymore. They live in the past.
That's right.
And short term, you can tell them something, and 5 minutes later, they've forgotten it. But they can give you details about things that happened,
That's exactly right.
decades
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, I was amazed at the details that my father remembered. And he even remembered, all the prisoners had a number. In every concentration camp, prisoners had numbers. Their names
Yeah.
were taken away from them and they were given numbers. And my father remembered the beginning of his number. He actually remembered it. He didn't remember the whole number, but he remembered the beginning of it. He remembered that it started with 76. And I
Wow.
mean, all kinds of, he remembered the emblem in the concentration camp. The whole concentration camp system had the same system of emblems for the prisoners, so that at a glance you could tell the prisoner, what kind of prisoner it was. Was it a political prisoner, or was it, some other kind of prisoner? And you could tell the nationality of the prisoner. They had a whole system of emblems. And he remembered, and the emblem was a triangle, and the triangle had one or two letters inside of it to abbreviate the prisoner's nationality or country of origin. And he remembered the color of his triangle, and he remembered the first part of his number all those years later, and many other details. But those were some that I could prove. And
Well, one of our viewers is asking about the title of the book, and we haven't. Do you have the book handy so you can show us the cover?
oh, sure.
So it's an Afro-Caribbean in the Nazi era, and then the other word I couldn't pronounce, so I didn't try. So,
Yeah, yeah. The subtitle is From Papiamento to German. Yeah,
okay,
Papiamento is a language, one of my father's languages, one of the languages that he spoke. It's a Spanish and Portuguese-based Creole that is spoken in the Southern Caribbean. It originated on the island of Curacao, but it's also spoken on the other Dutch islands in the Southern Caribbean, Aruba and Bonaire. So it's spoken in Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire, but it's also spoken in St. Martin, which is where my father was from. And pretty much everybody, born in the Dutch Caribbean, or most people, who have deep family roots in the Dutch Caribbean can speak that language. But I subtitled it from Papiamento to German because, well, for a few reasons, but one of them was that it was meant to pay tribute to the role of languages in my father's survival. That was very, very fundamental to his survival because he could speak all of these different languages. And like I said, prisoners with language skills were often allowed to live longer. But to me, Papiamento really symbolizes the Caribbean and my father's origins. And German symbolizes this very harsh environment that he was thrust into during the war. And to me, Papiamento is really the dignity and freedom that he came from. And German is the dehumanization and the captivity that he experienced over there in Europe. And Papiamento was it symbolizes to me the gainful employment that he had as opposed to the enslavement that he was subjected to in that concentration camp. And of course, Papiamentu is peace and German is war. So, there are huge contrasts between Papiamentu and German in my father's life. And that was why I subtitled it the way I did, but mostly because it pays tribute to the role of languages in my father's survival.
Wow. This is a very fascinating
It's a fascinating story.
story. Well, factual story
Thank you.
um, that you just never hear about. So, have you like made the rounds and interviews, or how are you getting the word out about your book?
Well, events like this, for which I'm very grateful. And I also give a lot of presentations at conferences, and I'm invited to be a kind of a guest lecturer at many university classes, and even some high school classes. And yeah, things like that. A lot of people invite me back a lot of professors invite me back every semester to give presentations to their classes. Well, not a lot of professors, but some professors do that. And I love giving presentations at conferences. Next week, I'm going to be presenting at the National Council for Black Studies, and that's going to be in Baltimore. And I I've given presentations in Austria and the Netherlands and of course uh, London and in St. Martin, several presentations, and in this country, a lot of different venues. So that's how I do it. But also, a movie has just been made of this book, and
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yeah.
well, you buried the lead.
Yeah. Well, that is an Austrian production. It was a made-for-TV docudrama in Austria, and unfortunately, it's not available outside of Austria.
Well,
So
Oh,
somebody's going to catch on to it. It's going to be in the
yeah.
States in about a year.
I hope so. Yeah, I really hope so. The name of it is From Paradise to Hell, and
Oh,
it's got almost all Austrian actors, or I think all Austrian actors. Yeah, and including the one that plays my father. He's black, and he's from Austria,
Austria.
and
Wow.
yeah, and yeah, the producer director is a lady who she has so much courage and so much vision and so much perseverance. It took her a very long time to get the funding together, and she persevered until she was able to pull this together, and it was
Wow.
filmed last, let me see, between August and September. Yeah, I think only between August and September.
So about a
Um,
month.
yeah, about 2 months of filming.
Well, we
And
Okay.
wish you all the best with this project. I wish we could see it, but
yeah,
unfortunately, we've run out of time. But
oh,
we do want to wish you all the best and
thank
congratulations
thank
on seeing this project through. It sounds like an amazing, amazing project. I'm looking forward to reading the book myself.
thank you.
Um, in fact, I'm going to go out and order it because this is a story worth telling, and I know it's a story worth reading. So
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing your father's story with the world.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I appreciate this very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you very, very much.
You have a great night. Take care.
God bless. Good
God
night.
bless you. Take care. Bye bye.